Hello and welcome back to the colony with Man of the Antz. So this is something a little different again today. This
Use the teleport button to move forward into the chapel.
Well, thank you very much.
Depending on your controller configuration, you can adjust the direction you'll be facing when you teleport, as shown by the arrow on the floor.
Cool.
Feel free to move around during your tour to get a better vantage point.
Will do.
Go ahead and try this now. We will begin shortly.
So this is Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. This is a guided tour of the Sistine Chapel. So, as you may know, I do really enjoy things like this. There was a virtual museum thing I did quite a while back now, and not so long ago there was the Scream, which was a really interesting sort of brief history of the artist who did the Scream, whose name immediately escapes me, but both of those things I'm pretty sure were free, and both of them were absolutely fascinating. This is also a free experience, and as I've never been to see the Sistine Chapel, and I'm sure you could never see the Sistine Chapel without anybody else here.
Standing in a virtual recreation of the Sistine Chapel. You have just walked through the entrance and are experiencing the work as the artist intended.
Why wouldn't you want to give it a go?
First seen by the people of Rome in December 1512. In our time, roughly 20,000 tourists a day are herded through this room, entering from a small door on the altar wall and exiting through a side door that will be installed in the 19th century. It is overwhelming.
It is.
Mind reels. It's hard to focus on any one thing as you crane your neck and succumb to sensory visual overload.
I never realized
it was the German poet
it had all these panels around the side as well.
Seen the Sistine Chapel, you can have no adequate conception of what one man is capable of accomplishing.
It's insane.
Above is over 6,000 square feet of painted fresco, largely created by one man. A man who didn't even want this job. Michelangelo Buonarroti, at age 33, was considered the greatest living sculptor after his creation of statues like the Pietà and the David. Some considered him the greatest living artist, period. One of these admirers was Pope Julius II. His uncle, Sixtus, had built this very chapel that bears his name when he was pope. At the time, the ceiling above you was covered in bright blue ultramarine paint with thousands of small gold stars. Pope Julius decided that he would add to his uncle's chapel and decorate its ceiling. He convened his Vatican artists to devise a plan. The artists, namely Donato Bramante, realized that this was going to be an extremely difficult task. He told Julius that he should award the ceiling commission to Michelangelo, the young sculptor from Florence. If he was indeed the greatest artist of our time, he would have no problem completing this commission.
I mean, what a... That man's just holding human skin.
Unfortunately for us, the Pope was convinced. All Bramante and his artist friends had to do was sit back and watch Michelangelo fail. Michelangelo pleaded with the Pope. He was a sculptor, not a painter. He had no experience painting fresco, but the Pope didn't care. So Michelangelo fled Rome, and the Pope sent an envoy to hunt him down.
I had no idea about that.
When he refused, the ambassador said he would either decorate the Pope's ceiling or risk the invasion of Florence, his hometown.
Crap.
Needless to say, back then you didn't say no to the Pope.
Threaten him with war.
The ceiling above you took 4 years to complete, from 1508 to 1512. This includes a brief meltdown in the middle where he again fled and again was brought back under guard by armed papal soldiers. During this time, Michelangelo painted the entire ceiling you see, everything from the top of the windows up. Let me remind you, it took Leonardo 6 years to complete this,
wow,
which I'm placing here at actual size. Seriously. Michelangelo was originally commissioned to paint the 12 apostles over the windows, and some elaborate geometric designs above their heads filling the vault. This was a Herculean task, not just painting a huge curved vault 70 feet off the ground, but dealing with ever-changing sightlines that, from the floor, presented almost impossible problems of perspective and foreshortening. Michelangelo was not one to be intimidated by difficulties.
Well, he tried to run away twice.
He heard them, sought them out, at times even created them.
I don't think he did, because he ran away twice.
That the existing plan was boring, and he would come up with something new. If he was going to do something, he was going to own it. So here's this young guy who doesn't want the job, who isn't trained to do the job, but reluctantly accepts the commission and then decides to completely alter it to an unheard of level of ambition never before seen. Not
well, that's
even
just crazy.
Antiquity. So Michelangelo decides that the chapel, as it exists now, with his Quattrocento frescoes on the walls depicting the lives of Moses and Christ, what is missing is everything that came before. He will literally paint biblical Genesis, surrounded by the Old Testament prophets and pagan Greek symbols who foretold the coming of Christ. In the four corners, he will depict Old Testament Jewish heroes overcoming their enemies. He painted over 300 figures encased in this fictional painted architectural scheme, the first of its kind, that serves to unify and harmonize everything into a single coherent cosmic whole. Unsure of himself, Michelangelo had assembled a team of experts to help him. He started right above where you entered the chapel, painting the Great Flood and the prophet Zechariah. After having painted Zechariah, which is believed to be a portrait of Pope Julius himself, the Pope was very pleased. He said it was a superb work and that Michelangelo could decorate the rest of the chapel in any manner he wished.
Wow.
Effectively silencing disgruntled papal scholars alarmed at his plan to decorate their most holy chapel with pagan images. The Vatican artists, upon seeing this portrait, ridiculed Michelangelo, saying that he did not know foreshortening or perspective, that he was essentially a fool.
He did say he didn't know what he was doing.
To look down the room at Jonah, who caps the other end of this vault. He leans backwards in his throne, but the vault is actually curving forwards. He stretches his legs out into the real space of the chapel. He and Haman to his left are two of the most virtuoso examples of foreshortening in the history of art. But let's get back to the flood.
Okay.
The scaffold had been disassembled, and viewing it from the ground for the first time, Michelangelo was very disappointed. Here, he had hired the best fresco painters in Italy, and under their guidance, he had created figures that were hardly discernible from the floor. He started to doubt himself. Perhaps Bramante and the others were right.
But he did do that as well.
Never one to waste energy on confrontation, though. He arrived the next morning and locked everyone out. Save for a few Florentine friends to aid him with preparations, he would do the rest himself, and the doors would remain locked.
That's just insane.
You'll notice that from here down the vault, the figures become larger. They all exist in 3 dimensions, as though they are occupying space amid the marble architecture. This is a sculptor painting. There are no lush environments or backgrounds, no incidental details whatsoever. These are massive giants, looming figures that demand our attention as individuals. Let's go over the central flattened section of the vault.
Okie dokie.
What's depicted are the first 9 verses of Genesis, starting at the altar wall with God separating light from darkness, and ending above you with the drunkenness of Noah. This is the biblical narrative, painted in reverse order,
didn't know
from
Noah got
sin
drunk.
to salvation. You have the fall of Noah, and you follow this back across 3 organized groups, portraying Adam and Eve and God creating the earth. Remember, the guy hesitant to paint 12 apostles has now decided to depict the creation of the entire universe.
What a mad lad.
Notice this large marble fence erected on the floor.
I do.
The transept. It was meant to divide members of the Vatican from the visiting faithful. If you look up, see how this feature divides the biblical narrative. God is only portrayed on the liturgical or Vatican side and does not cross over into the lay area of the room to mingle with us common folk. Flanking the biblical histories are the giants we spoke of, the Old Testament prophets and pagan sibyls who foretold the coming of Christ. They are superhumans that exist on a plane between God and the lower figures surrounding them. Those figures, in the triangular spandrels and rainbow-shaped lunettes above each window, are the ancestors of Christ. These are some of the most profoundly human images ever painted. This concludes our brief orientation. Now that you have your bearings, the trigger on the control in your hand will allow you to inspect figures and elements on the ceiling. When one is highlighted, press the trigger to start or stop hearing information about that selected item. You can move freely around the floor of the chapel, or select the aerial work platform in the corner to hop in and take a closer look like a Vatican conservator.
Yes, bloody please.
To learn more about the creation of the Sistine ceiling, select the wooden scaffold in the opposite corner. We hope you enjoy this experience as much as we enjoyed making it.
So I'm assuming that... how do I get in this? How do I get in this?
This is the actual aerial work platform that the Vatican conservators used to inspect the scene.
Well, I'm not...
Hold on. We're going to teleport up there.
I was going to say.
You can now press the touchpad to move around at this height. If you'd like to learn about the cleaning and restoration, click the dirty spandrel that is lit with a spotlight. To teleport back down, click on the chapel floor.
I mean, this is the exact thing that VR is. As much as I love VR games, and I don't really do it myself, but I know people like P. Diddy love watching 3D films in VR or just watching other films in VR, watching them in big screen and that sort of thing. To me, this is what VR is about. Things like the screen, things like the virtual museums. Like, when would you ever in a million years have a chance to get on an elevator in the Sistine Chapel and stand this close to the Sistine Chapel ceiling? It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Like, how many people get to experience this? I mean, obviously now pretty much anyone can experience it, but without VR, who would even have a chance of experiencing this? It's insane. Absolutely insane. Let's try clicking. So all the little bits, even the pillars. Like all of it's clickable. That's insane. I want to know more about the big thing. We won't do everything, obviously.
25 years after completing the ceiling, Michelangelo did paint this entire altar wall.
Oh, he did that as well.
He was a 67-year-old man, and many of his contemporaries, including Julius, had passed. It shows Judgment Day as Christ the Redeemer casts the souls to hell and elevates the saved to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
The focus of this experience was on the ceiling, and it'd be a fool's errand to attempt to cover the altar wall at the same time. To explore the Last Judgment in detail, please download the experience when it's publicly available. Click on the altar wall once more to hear one of my favorite brief descriptions of the Last Judgment from renowned art historian Romain Rolland.
I'm not going to do that, although I would quite happily spend like 3 or 4 hours, or however long it takes, clicking every single thing in here, finding out everything. Whenever I go on holiday, me and my wife love just to like spend huge amounts of time in museums and just like look at everything and read everything. Because if you're going to go somewhere, you may as well learn about it, right? And when we've gone to places like that with other people, we kind of get, and me in particular, get kind of hurried along because people are like, we've been here for like 3 hours. What the hell are you still doing here? You're only halfway through. So there are things I've had to run through because other people have needed to get past or get through. And when there are, as there were when I was in Ireland, another 5, 6 people, whatever there were, you have to sort of go with the crowd a little bit. You can hold them as much as you can, but you have to at some point relent. But yeah, so I could spend just however long it takes to listen to everything, I could spend all that time doing it. I am going to listen to the restoration part.
The cleaning of the Sistine Chapel ceiling is the most controversial restoration project in the history of art.
I bet.
It was funded by a Japanese television company in return for photographic rights to the ceiling.
Oh.
How do you sell photographic rights to something that has no copyright? A work that's been in the public domain for hundreds of years?
Yeah.
By screaming over a loud PA system at any visitor or tourist who attempts to take a photo.
I mean, I
Let's
get
travel
it, but...
back in time to the 1960s. Here's an approximation of how the chapel ceiling looked in 1965, taken directly from scant photographic evidence. The ceiling had really darkened over 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
Early cleaners had used these rabbit glue varnishes to try and shine up the ceiling and bring back some color. But those same varnishes became darkened by hundreds of years of soot from candles, oil lamps, and incense.
Mm-hmm.
If you climbed the wooden scaffold to hear about how Michelangelo painted the ceiling, you learned about how color bonds into wet plaster, locking it in. At the time of the cleaning, the Vatican made the assumption that Michelangelo only painted on wet plaster.
Mm-hmm.
Going back later and painting on dry plaster is called a secco, and that's frowned upon by fresco painters because it's less durable. It can chip off.
But he's not a
or,
fresco
in
painter.
this case, be scrubbed off. Here's the time where I again remind you Michelangelo isn't a painter. Many art historians claim that Michelangelo did paint a secco. He did this to retouch and fix areas and also add black to shade and darken parts of figures, most notably their eyes. It was important to him that you could read the exact gaze direction from the floor, as we've discussed. The Vatican, of course, claims this is false. They only removed grime and soot, showing Michelangelo's true artistic intent. But you, my friend, are in the unique position to judge for yourself. Imagine that you're a Vatican restorer. We're going to scrub the Jesse spandrel here with a sponge soaked in the harsh chemical compound.
Okie dokie.
Let's wipe away years of soot and grime to reveal Michelangelo's true work.
Oh, let's bloody well do it. It's night and day, isn't it?
Did you notice anything? Yeah, you just removed her eyeballs. Imagine being that person who scrubbed the eyes out of the sockets of one of the most piercing stares in all Renaissance art. She isn't alone in losing her eyes. Many figures were catastrophically damaged.
Wow.
The architectural details were also painted a secco, and they have been removed. Shadow and definition has been removed, leaving what many consider to be underpainting. Just how much irreversible damage did the restoration attempt do to the ceiling? We will never really know. The Vatican is understandably tight-lipped. They no longer reproduce any images taken before the restoration.
That's insane.
I had a hard time piecing together this above you. The Vatican often cite and blame previous undocumented restoration attempts. In the case of the eyes you just scrubbed off, they actually claim that Michelangelo left her with hollow eyeless sockets, and that a later restorer added eyes, which they then removed.
That makes sense, yeah.
Fortunately, the ceiling was a massive draw for Renaissance artists, and we have a lot of drawings of it, from the first days when it was unveiled, showing shadows and eyes that the restoration removed.
Weird that, yeah, he
cuts
would
their
paint
defense
eyes on
against
people.
these. It should be said, though, that they claimed these lunettes first. They noticed, as you just did, that they are removing the artist's a secco work. But they continued with scrubbing the entire ceiling.
That's mental. What's wrong with people? Wow. I mean, like I say, I could honestly just do this. Oh. For ages. But I think I'll probably leave that there. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of taste of what it's like to stand in the Sistine Chapel on a elevator crane and almost tip over a box of cheeky wipes that are on the floor. Wow. I will probably come back to this myself at some point when I have... Oh, calm down. When I have an hour, just to click on a few more things and see what there is, because, yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff. If there are a few people out there who would, by any chance, want to see every single thing clicked on and all the explanations and the wooden scaffolding, in fact, I might just start the wooden scaffolding off, just so we can see what that sort of looks like.
Above you is a recreation of the original wooden scaffold, designed by Michelangelo. He was an amazing architect.
Oh, I
creating,
see.
amongst other things, the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, which is still the tallest dome ever built. He created the scaffold in a way that allowed him to move and extend it along these wooden beams resting on the wall.
Yeah.
This was such a pragmatic design that 500 years later, the team that set out to restore the ceiling actually recreated this exact same scaffold to do their work.
Oh, yeah, why wouldn't he?
This time. Hold on, we're going to teleport up onto the scaffold where you can take a look. For 4 years, Michelangelo lived up here. He had assistants bring and mix paint, prep plaster.
Well, I can't move the scaffold, which is a bit of a shame, because look how close I am now. Oh my god.
He had special candles that let off minimal smoke made of animal fat so that the wax burnt instead of dripping.
And you can really see how, like, the perspective is so much different from up here, from what you... Oh, that's what he's talking about. I can't remember what it was now.
Your neck is probably already aching from looking up the past few minutes. Now think about painting.
You can really see from up here how it is, how the perspective has been warped to make it look better from underneath.
Not only know how long Michelangelo spent on this.
That's insane.
You know the exact order in which he painted the ceiling, down to how much work he accomplished in a single day. How do we know this? Because in order for pigments to bind to fresco for all eternity, In order for the colors to become part of the stone, you have to paint plaster while it's wet.
Which we
This
discussed.
is a huge time constraint to something that's already stressful enough. The amount of wet plaster you can paint in a day is called a giornata, and these giornata, or individual sections of plaster, could be seen when inspecting the ceiling closely.
I can't believe there's a word
Take a
for
look
that.
above you at the creation of Adam.
Yep.
It's 16 giornata in total.
No.
Let's look at the plaster sections. Sampling how the plaster of each section overlaps with the previous, we know the exact order these sections were painted. Let's fade in each section as he painted it in those 16 days.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
If I had the time, I could do this for every inch of the ceiling. We could fade in each day's work, starting above the door where you entered, and progressing over the entire ceiling in the exact order he painted it, all the way to the altar wall, and then finally the lunettes. We have so much detailed insight into the time and anguish he spent up here, largely because of this letter, a poem that he sent to a friend. In it, he describes the working conditions and even sketched himself painting the ceiling in the margins.
Oh, he did?
I will leave you with this, his own words, but you can click on the floor at any time to head back down. I've grown a goiter from this torture, hunched up here like a cat in Lombardy, or anywhere else where the water's a stagnant poison.
So uncomfortable.
My stomach squashed under my chin, my beard's pointing at heaven, my brain's crushed in a casket. My breast twists like a harpy's. My brush, above me all the time, dribbles paint onto my face and makes a fine floor for the droppings. My haunches are grinding into my guts. My poor ass strains to work as a counterweight. Every gesture I make is blind and aimless. My skin hangs loose below me. My spine's knotted and folding all over itself. I'm bent taut as a Syrian bow. Because I'm stuck like this, my thoughts are crazy, perfidious tripe. Anyone shoots badly through a crooked blowpipe. My painting is dead. Defend it from me, Giovanni. Protect my honor. I am not in the right place. I am not a painter.
I mean, how could anyone who can do any of this say to themselves, calm down, that they're not a painter? That's mental. I do really wish that you could move the scaffolding around so you could get this close to all of the ceiling. I think that would be amazing. But that doesn't seem to be a thing, unfortunately, which is the only thing. And I would also like what he said about individually just painting the ceiling in one day at a time. I think that would be an amazing thing to see. So who knows, maybe they'll do like a paid version of this where you can actually see that. So this is a free experience. So if you're even vaguely interested in this stuff, and again, you have obviously a VR headset, take a look. I do believe it actually is non-VR as well. I think there is a non-VR version of this because when you start up, it's not in VR, and I think you have to select VR to get it going. So if you have any interest in art whatsoever, then definitely take a look at this. It's absolutely amazing. I have nothing but the utmost respect and admiration for people who love this stuff so much they put the time and effort into doing something like this VR experience, so that muggles like me can take a look at it. Because, I mean, again, how many people have stood this close to the Sistine Chapel? To the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Literally stood in the same place as Michelangelo where he painted it. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But yes, I could drivel on for just so long about this, but I should probably leave that there now. Wow. So let's... and I can't... No, straight back down. That is a shame. I would love to move that scaffolding around. Yeah, wow. So I'm gonna leave that there. Really hope you enjoyed this whole experience. Yeah, look at the perspective from down here. Look, it's amazing. It's just amazing. And that was one of the first things he painted. And again, really demonstrates what he was saying about the size increasing, the size of that dude, of who I've forgotten who it is already. My biblical knowledge is quite limited. And even the, what were these? Apostles, they weren't apostles. They were the people who had told of the forecoming of Christ, weren't they? The pagans. Even there you can see them getting steadily bigger as you go down. It truly is amazing. Anyway, I'm going to have to leave that there because otherwise I'm going to be here for hours. Really hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, do click the like button. Do check it out yourselves. There'll be a link in the description as always, or you could just look on Steam. I can't imagine it'd be that hard to find, as long as you can spell Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. Yeah, wow. I mean, what else can you say? Like it, comment, subscribe, all those good things. Don't forget I stream Wednesdays at 6 p.m. UK time, so come along and say hello there if you're around. Otherwise, I'll see you next time in some other just insanely magical VR adventure. And as always, thank you very, very much for joining me.